Welcome to LITE It Up, a podcast about resilient women balancing motherhood, their careers, personal lives, and all of the challenges that come along with being a superwoman. Each week, you'll be motivated to take action to lead, inspire, transform, and empower. Now, here's your host, Dr. Aginah M. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of LITE It Up. I am your host, Dr. Aginah M. I'm so excited about this week's episode because we are in, back to school mode. Folks are going back into the classroom, undergrad students, grad students. And I have the pleasure of having very esteemed guest who I guess you're my colleague, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Although I'm not normally on the in the classroom, but this week we have Professor Kim Moon, who is a senior lecturer in the College of Business at the University of Illinois at Chicago, which, as you all know, is the institution that I work at, and it's also my alma mater. But Professor Moon has worked in the field of sales and marketing for various Fortune 500 firms, for about 14 years or so prior to,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes,
prior to
that's correct.
into higher ed. And you are very active in your community with volunteer work. You're also a mom of four. So we may talk about that a little bit. I need to know how you balance all of that and being a mom of four. And you are also a 30-year member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. So thank you so very
Yes.
much for joining me today, and welcome to LITE It Up.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
So we are gonna talk about a few important topics. When we talked earlier, we talked about, as a professor, some of the tools that you believe students need to be successful as they enter into this higher education space. And oftentimes, parents are wondering what can I do to help my son or daughter prepare for matriculation as an undergraduate student, or even some folks may be concerned about their grad students, especially if they are footing the bill for that tuition.
Exactly.
So I'm glad that you decided to join in today so that you can kind of give us an inside scoop and talk about the confessions of a professor, and give us some of those tips that are greatly needed in order to be successful. So why don't we, before we delve into that, why don't we kind of talk about your background as far as business and marketing, and how you managed to transition from the corporate setting into the higher education space? What made you decide to make that transition?
So great question, Agina. So back in 2000, I got the opportunity to be an adjunct while working at Whirlpool in marketing. And it was just something new I wanted to try.
Mm-hmm.
And I absolutely loved it. So I taught my first marketing course back in 2000.
Okay.
And when I moved to Chicago, I continued to work. It was at a community college. I
Mm-hmm.
continued to work for them as a online instructor.
Okay. Okay.
And then I transitioned to another community college in the area. And then a few years after that, I joined UIC in 2008.
Okay. Awesome. So let me ask you, because I've also, like you, I've taught at a community college. I've also taught online courses, and then I've had the opportunity to teach at UIC as well. But I've taught the first year seminar courses. Do you
Okay.
find what's the difference as a professor teaching an online course, teaching in community college, and teaching at a 4-year institution.
Okay, so let's tackle the online
Okay.
versus butts and seats.
Okay.
It's very difficult to teach an online course, much more difficult. I think we are, as humans, conditioned to learn by being in an actual room, looking at someone face to face, relying on that communication to happen that way versus over Zoom or I think you need students need more motivation in terms of time management skills, greater or better time management skills to actually navigate an online course to be successful. And as a teacher, you're working extra hard to communicate in various ways, right? Because students have different ways of learning. And so the communication piece, I think, is the biggest hurdle that both students and instructors have to overcome.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'm glad that you mentioned that, but only because we just had an entire year, academic year of teaching and learning online. And I just couldn't imagine having to do that because you're right. As an instructor, you're working twice as hard.
Oh, yes. And research has shown that about 70% of students, as a result of the pandemic, I don't think it's just being online, but as a result of the pandemic and taking courses online, that they are more stressed, that they have found it very difficult to focus. And I know as an instructor, I did see that when students left at the end of the semester and did not turn in their midterm grades. And I don't know if they were looking at Blackboard and understanding that they were failing. But that was the first time that I actually had that happen where students did not reach out to me beforehand to say, hey, I'm not sure if I'm going to pass the class because I did not complete these assignments. I actually had to be proactive to reach out to students. So just the level of engagement is much lower.
Wow. Okay. And then as far as the community college setting.
Yes. So one thing I did notice, and that is from a demographics standpoint, there were quite a few more older students or adults taking courses, and they work hard. And I really enjoyed teaching them because they realized that this was their second opportunity at learning. And I just enjoyed, just interacting with them and learning from them. So just from a demographic standpoint, it was different.
Okay. Well, so as a senior lecturer at UIC, you come across undergrad students, graduate students. With your students, do you have an opportunity to teach first year students, or are you teaching more the upper level as far as undergrad students are concerned?
Teach juniors and seniors primarily, yes.
Okay. All right. So once they're at that level, hopefully they have kind of figured out the lay of the land and know what they should and should not do in terms of being successful in the classroom. But I'm pretty sure that there may be a few students who may still need a little help in that area. So as a professor, can you share with us what are, what are the keys to success? What are you looking for from your students? And what do you recommend that they do to be successful?
Okay, so there are 10 things, Aginah, that I would like to share with your listeners. Okay. And so let's talk about them. So number one, this is the easiest thing for students to do, and that is to come to class. Come to class and check in when you're in class. And I'll explain what I mean by checking in. So you may think as a student that professors don't recognize when you're not in class. I don't know why I'm able to do this, and I'm sure other professors are too, but I mentally have a quadrant in my class, and students are creatures of habit. They will sit in that quadrant, right? Every time they come into class, maybe not in that exact same seat, but they will sit in that quadrant. And so when I mentally don't see that student in that quadrant, I know that they are absent. So I group my students into two different groups: regularly attending and students that don't regularly attend. And I'll talk about why that's so important. Even if they're not physically taking attendance or keeping a physical record, your professors know when you change your hairstyle. They know when things are changing around them. So just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. The other thing is checking in. So when students come to class, you want to be able to participate, ask questions, and to engage in the conversation, right? So give answers and ask questions. But you can't do that if you have not read. So research has shown that about 25% of students actually read the textbook before coming to class. So I highly encourage my students to read before coming to class. And I think it's a paradigm shift, because I think in K through 12, we as teachers teach students to memorize and to come to class, and the instructor or your teacher will give you the information. But as it relates to post-secondary education, students need to come to class having read some of the material, because we have 50 minutes or an hour to convey the information. We can't give you everything. So students have to come to class armed with some level of information prior to the lecture. And what I find is that does not happen, even at that level in their academic career.
Wow. Okay. I don't know why I'm surprised. but it is surprising.
Yes. So the second thing, Aginah, is probably, if I could just give one piece of advice to students, this would be it. And that is to cultivate that relationship with their instructor. And there are many ways to do that. First of all, before you even take the class, before you even step foot in the class, research the instructor. Read their CV, their resume, find out their area of research, find out any information you can about them, and then email them to introduce yourself to them. And maybe there is you have a common interest with them. Maybe you went to the same high school. You just never know. And I'll give you an example of that. But it's so important to make that connection before you actually set foot in the classroom. Okay. The other thing is, once you're in the classroom, you want to conference with them. You want to set up meetings and attend office hours with them. It's one thing to meet them outside of class in the hallway or to ask questions after class, but it's a totally different relationship when you're actually sitting down face to face in the office space of the instructor, talking to them. Maybe you see a picture of their kids and you can ask them personal questions. That's where you're cultivating a different level of a relationship when you do things like that. And I can tell you, Aginah, I've taught for over 20 years, 13 years at UIC. I would say I probably have had 13 meetings with students over the years.
Are you serious?
Students do not come to office hours. They do not come to office hours. They will stop me in the hallway. They will stop me after class. I'll have a long line after class,
Mm-hmm.
but very few students take the opportunity to actually meet me in my office or set up office hours.
I
Yeah.
don't understand that. I mean, and typically, I know when I was teaching, I had office hours probably 3 days a week. And
hmm
but I have to be honest, the students who came to my office hours, it was probably towards the end of the semester or when there was maybe a midterm exam and they knew they were struggling and they were trying to figure out what could they do um in order to
What could they
pass.
do?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And just
desperation.
yeah. Oh my goodness. But that is something.
You don't want that to be your first meeting with your instructor. And
Yeah.
I'll talk about why
Okay.
that's the case.
Okay.
But yes, so those are just missed opportunities to actually, make those connections or make that connection and have that relationship with them.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
So and especially with large courses or large classes where there are 100 or 200 people in the class, you definitely want to try to get in to be a brand name and not a number. You
Yes.
want your instructor to know your name. That's the end game. You want
And
them to call you out by name.
right. Do you think though that sometimes students are afraid for professors to know them by name? I mean, to know who they are. I don't know.
I
Just
I do. I think students are intimidated for whatever reason, but we are human
mhm,
and we're lovable. We're loving people. We care. We
mhm.
are a student's biggest advocate in the classroom. So I just think if students took the time to get to know us,
Mhm.
and we're all different. Let
Yeah.
me just say that we have different personalities and we're all different, but I think the majority of us took this job because we care about students.
Yeah.
And the goal is graduation is the goal.
Mhm.
And so we want students to succeed and to be able to graduate.
Absolutely.
So we'll do whatever we need to do to make that happen.
Yeah. And oftentimes I will say this, I mean, I have certainly shared with my own children. I know, you're a mom too, and as mine are preparing to go to college next year, but I will say to them, if you communicate with even now as high school students, if you communicate with your
Yes.
teachers, and then going forward when you're in college, you never know. That may make a difference. If you've been coming to office hours, if you've been participating in class, if you're on a borderline between, a letter grade, if I know you,
Aginah,
then I know like
I
what your potential is. You know what I mean? And I may be more
yes,
inclined to bump your grade up.
yes. I tell my kids that all the time because true confession, I have changed some borderline grades
Hmm. I have to.
for those students.
Yeah, I have to. Yeah,
Um, but it's because I knew them.
right.
It was because I knew what type of student they were,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
I knew that they had tried and put in the effort.
Right. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They had reached out to me, they had contacted me, they were really trying.
Mhm.
And so you're absolutely right. I tell my kids that all the
Mhm.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, trust me, guys, this is what you want to do.
Right. Right.
Yes.
Exactly. Okay. So these are some really great points that you've shared so far. So what else do you um, have in your arsenal that you want to share with us? We want to get
So
all of it.
here are some things that will interfere with building and cultivating a relationship. So this is a personal pet peeve of mine.
Okay.
That is the distraction of the cell phone,
Mhm.
the computer,
Mhm.
and the chatter.
Okay.
Okay. So when you're texting, when students are texting with their cell phone, and I know when students are texting because they're looking down in their laps, even if the cell phone isn't on the desk, right? So
Mhm.
we know you're when students are on the phone,
Yeah.
because that means that you aren't checked in, which is what
Mhm.
I talked about earlier.
Right.
When you're having a conversation with your neighbor, that means if I have a class of 50 students, I may have 4 different conversations going on. So that means the person that you're talking to isn't able to pay attention, and the people around you aren't able to pay attention. And if you're having all of these conversations, if students are having all of these conversations, that means I can hear you.
Yeah.
And so that means that I can't focus on the lecture.
Mhm.
I'll give you one example of that. I don't allow cell phones or computers in my classroom.
Okay.
So students are asked to put away cell phones and computers at the start of class. And this is why. I would say maybe my second year at UIC, there was a student who sat in the front room and was watching movies. On this particular day, she was watching Mamma Mia. So you've got all these people dancing. So obviously, it was a huge distraction to everyone that sat behind her.
Yes.
And in this particular classroom, I walked the length of the classroom. And when I got to the back, students whispered to me, "She's watching movies over
Mhm.
there." And I said,
Mhm.
"Okay, thank you." So I
Mhm.
made a general announcement for students at that time to put their computers away. And ever since then, I haven't allowed computers in the classroom.
I Now that is just mind-boggling to me, but maybe because I'm older. But I couldn't even imagine when I was a student, although that was many moons ago, but I couldn't imagine sitting in a class watching a movie. But
She was watching movies. Now she said she had a disability, and a long story short, she ended up filing a complaint against me.
mm,
Now, I did not have a letter of accommodations for her on file. She
mhm,
did not give that to me. And
mhm,
so she said that she had to watch movies. So we came to a compromise.
mm,
Like, you can't watch movies,
yeah,
but we can give you something else to watch to help you focus. But
yeah,
yes, so that was an interesting situation there.
very. Okay. So definitely don't be a distraction in the classroom.
Don't
Okay.
be a distraction, because I know my distractors.
Mhm,
So I know those my repeat offenders. So just like I know the students that are attending class, I
mhm,
know the ones that are uh, cause disruptions and distractors. And
mhm.
so that does not bode well or help you
Okay.
as you're trying to establish that relationship and cultivate that relationship with the instructor.
Yeah. Okay.
And so you touched on something a few minutes ago as it relates to communication. And so
Mm,
that's the next thing that I wanted to talk about is communicate, communicate, communicate,
mhm,
but communicate early.
mm,
So if you aren't going to be in class, send your professor a note, an email,
mhm,
and tell them why you're going to be absent. Get a doctor's note, bring a doctor's note in,
mhm,
let them know that you were ill. If students aren't able to meet a deadline, some students will ask me, I have a doctor's appointment or I have to travel. Am I able to send you this information the next day, or I'm going to be late? They will let me know,
mhm.
or let me know if they need special accommodations. And sometimes I will grant them uh,
Okay.
an extension,
Mhm, mhm,
or they may communicate to me that um, I can't complete this assignment for whatever reason, whatever the case is.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure, I think students should know that they should stay in constant communication with their instructor just to let them know what's going on, but to do it early.
Yeah.
Don't wait until, like you said, the end of the semester or when they're struggling. If they need help, they need to reach out to their instructors very early. And I think students are embarrassed, they may be ashamed for whatever reason. They may think I'm the only one that's having a problem or struggling in a certain area, but that is typically not the case.
Mm-hmm.
I can guarantee that.
Yeah.
But we don't know if students aren't telling us and communicating this information. We have no way to know and no way to help.
Right. Right. Okay. So communicate early. That
Communicate early.
okay.
The next thing is change. And this is where it becomes a little bit more challenging for students to be a change agent,
Mm.
to be an advocate when something needs to be changed.
Okay.
So, again, we're human,
Mm-hmm.
and I give lots of projects, essays, short answers, things of that nature, papers, research papers. And so those are subjective grades, don't you think? Right?
All right.
Somewhat?
Yeah.
Okay. So I may make a mistake here or there. I may be grading a paper at 2 a.m. in the morning and may take off some extra points unnecessarily.
Mm-hmm.
So if you as a student feel that you should have gotten more points, don't be afraid to challenge that grade
Mm.
and ask for the additional points and tell your instructor why.
Okay.
Here's something else. At the midterm of every class, I do what's called a stop, start, continue. I ask students, what should I start doing to help your learning experience? What should I stop doing? And what should I continue? Now, Aginah, I have actually changed assignments, eliminated assignments as a result of feedback that I've gotten from students at the midpoint in the course.
Okay.
I have changed weights.
Mm.
I have extended deadlines just because students have asked
Wow.
for changes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I may be an anomaly, or I may be much like many professors, whatever the case. If you need things to be changed, don't be afraid as a student to challenge
Mm-hmm.
grades, this whatever is on the syllabi. It can be changed. It's not set in stone. So it's important that students know that.
Yeah. Let me ask you, at the beginning of the semester, do you share with students that they'll have this opportunity at midterms to kind of, or do you wait until
I
midterms?
wait.
Okay. Okay.
I wait. I wait. I know it's coming. I
Yeah.
know it's coming. I know it's coming. They're going to ask for an extension. But I don't let them know that, because I want them to think that they don't have the extension and at least start on the assignment, right?
Okay.
And so maybe a few days before the due date, or maybe a week before, I may say, okay, let me give you an extension. I'll give you some extra time.
Okay. Okay.
Yes. Good question.
So what else? And I mean, I like the fact that you give students that opportunity to at least give you some feedback, versus waiting until the end of the semester when evaluations are due, and then you're getting the feedback then at that point. So it does give
Right.
you an opportunity as an instructor to make some adjustments if needed, potentially in your maybe not so much in your style of teaching, but as you stated, we're all human. You're going to get, all different types of students each semester anyway. So I'm sure
Right.
some semesters you may not maybe need to make any adjustment in the syllabi or what have you, but at least you are open to empowering students to, make them feel comfortable with providing you feedback so that adjustments can be made if necessary.
No, you're absolutely right. For example, I didn't realize when I was making my syllabi that some students are taking 3 of my classes at one time,
Oh, wow.
which means that they have 3 projects that are due at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so by doing this stop, start, continue, I was able to get that feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to keep that in mind, that there will be students that will take multiple classes with me at the same time. So you need to manage that.
Mm-hmm.
So you're absolutely right. It's a win-win situation. So it helps me to manage those the feedback at the end of the semester. So what I can fix at the midterm won't show up in the evaluations at the end, right?
Yes.
And then it
important.
also benefits, and that's important.
Yeah.
And it also benefits the students, more importantly, because the evaluation that they complete at the end of the semester doesn't help them. It helps the next class coming in, right?
Yeah. Now let me ask you this. This just occurred to me when you mentioned that, you may have students who are taking 3 of your courses in a semester. And as an instructor, obviously, okay, you're given these projects and these research papers that may be due. You also have to grade them, Kim.
I know.
How do
And
you
I ask myself every year, why do you do this to yourself?
Mhm.
So this year, I'm making some adjustments to that. I am cutting back on the number of pages for these assignments because I don't give exams.
Okay.
I tell my students when they show up at work,
Mhm.
when they leave college and they actually get to their desk,
Yeah.
there won't be a multiple choice exam waiting for them,
Yeah.
right?
True. That's true. Yeah.
Their boss is going to ask them to solve a problem.
Mhm.
And so I am going to teach you problem solving
Okay.
and strategy and
Mhm.
how to come up with solutions. So
Mhm.
we're going to get away from the memorizing concepts and things of that nature
Mhm.
and shift that paradigm, right?
Mhm.
So I'm not going to change that teaching philosophy,
Mhm.
but I am going to cut back on the number of pages for these projects.
But I like the fact that you're giving them problems because it's preparing them for the real world. Um, and it would actually be great um, if K through 12, because essentially what you're doing at the undergraduate level, in
Absolutely.
some ways, you're trying to shift that mindset and that thinking about how students approach academics, because as you mentioned earlier, K through 12, it's about memorization and preparing for the
Yes.
test.
Yes.
But that's not what's happening in an undergraduate or graduate setting at all. There are probably more not project-based team assignments, team projects
Yes.
that I'm
Yes.
sure most
Yes.
people don't really care for. But when you're in the workplace as a professional, you're going to have to work with other people, and work in
Yes.
teams.
Yes. That's one thing I wish I could change
Mhm,
for our students that are coming in
mhm,
from K through 12
mhm.
I wish that we were able to give them that experience, because it is using a different part of your brain, and it is difficult to get students to think
Yeah.
and not memorize.
Yes.
So to use that part of their brain, it is difficult to get them comfortable doing that.
Mhm.
It is a challenge.
And you
Yes,
only have
it
15
is a
weeks.
challenge.
You only have 15 weeks to try to
Exactly.
get that
Exactly.
too.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
So you've got your work cut out for you.
Exactly.
Okay.
The next thing is I want students to be able to calculate. So that's the next C. So if you haven't noticed, there's a pattern here with the C's.
Okay. Yep.
So calculate. And what do I mean by calculate? Aginah, you would be surprised at how many students don't look at their grades until the end of the semester. So they're not doing the calculation and figuring out, am I at a B or C, or am I failing? Where am I exactly? Right. And so for many of us as instructors, we use Blackboard
Yeah.
to house that information in Grade Center. And Blackboard is what I call the black box. It's like a black hole.
Yes.
The information that's in there, who knows what's in there? No one's looking. It just goes in and no one is paying attention, right? And so my advice to students is to not let that information just go into a black hole. It is to check Blackboard regularly, and not only check it for your grades, but assignments, announcements, and things of that nature. But also, if the grade is there, make sure it's right. Again, we are human. I have made mistakes and put in the incorrect grade for students. But you can't wait until the end of the semester when you get your final grade to email me and ask me, I don't understand why I got the grade that I got, right? Because now I have to go in and do a grade change. And it's harder once as an instructor, once your instructor submits grades, it's harder to get the grade changed.
Yes. Yes.
So if students just stay on top of those things, just stay on top of it, it would be to their benefit.
Well, let me make a confession as a mom educator. So my children,
what's your confession?
My confession is, so we use Power School, and my children just cannot stand me because when I get a notification, I'm asking questions. Well, how did this happen and why, and
Right.
9 times out of 10, it's been an error that the teacher made, or entered in the grade incorrectly, not so much as like looking at another student's grade and putting, the grade in for the wrong person, but just a clerical,
Right.
Typographical error. And I'm like, no, had I not been on top of you,
Yes.
questioning you,
Yes.
then this could have potentially impacted your grade at the end of the quarter or the end of the semester. So I'm one of those folks where when I get the alerts, I'm looking. Now I do realize
that's great.
But I know that once my children go to college next year, that's going to be on them to make sure that they're, like you said, calculating.
Well, let me also tell you this, and I'll get to this at the end of our conversation, and that is talking about this cohort, this academic team that students have. They may not realize they have an academic team, but they do. But we've had to deal with some parents calling the administrators and asking, what can you do to help my child graduate? So you may think they're on their own, but trust me, there are some parents that have decided that they needed to step in, and they have contacted us. So yeah.
I've had that experience at UIC before too.
You've had that experience talking to a parent?
Yeah, I have.
That actually, going back to your story with your kids, I actually had that exact same experience with my high schooler. She
Okay.
got a 0 on a part of her project.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, Mom, I got great feedback. And I did, and she did well. She had a marketing project actually, and
Oh,
I looked at it and I was like, no, that's really good. You should not have gotten a 0 on that. You need to call that teacher and
yeah.
inquire about that grade. And sure enough,
Mm-hmm.
it was a clerical error. She realized that she made a mistake and she
Mm-hmm.
should not have gotten a 0.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, so
Yeah.
you're right. So we're human. We do
Right.
make mistakes.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So connecting with classmates, you would be surprised, Aginah, when you start to ask students to introduce themselves, talk about their jobs and what they're doing in terms of their interests and their hobbies, the similarities that exist in the classroom. And so I've been able to make connect students just by having introductions the first week of class.
Okay.
But it's a student's way, even if the teacher doesn't do the formal introductions,
Mm-hmm.
when you're in groups, when students are in groups, they should be asking questions. So, what's your name? Tell
Mm-hmm.
me a little bit about what you do. What are your interests?
Mm-hmm.
They should use those classrooms as an opportunity to do some networking. Students have jobs, they will graduate with jobs. Um, Many students at UIC have their own businesses. So there are many opportunities and great advantages to making connections in the classroom. And so students should not underestimate that.
That's a really good tip as well. Now,
Mm-hmm.
do you outside of, you know, your instructional time and teaching, do you mentor students at UIC, or do you even have time for that? When you have students who do take advantage of your office hours or who try to establish, a relationship with you, have you been asked to mentor any students?
Informally.
Okay.
So I have met students for dinner, for
Mhm.
lunch. So I have established relationships outside of the classroom with some of my past students, and I still
Mhm.
keep in contact with them.
Okay.
Um, to go back to the networking piece, I actually had a student to talk to me during class or outside of class during office hours about his job. And he
Mhm.
told me that he worked at Starbucks
Okay.
and he was part of the marketing launch team when ARC opened
Oh
on
yeah.
campus a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so we were networking and talking, and I said, wow, that's amazing. I would like to meet your manager. Would you mind introducing me to the manager?
Mhm.
Aginah, do you know the manager and I have been collaborating since that time, and he actually helps me with my marketing and advertising class,
Oh,
with helping us with giving us projects.
oh
So
wow.
the
That's awesome.
students actually work with Starbucks for this particular course, and
Okay.
we've done it 3 different semesters.
Mhm.
And it's a win-win for Starbucks because they get the free support, the
Right.
marketing support, and they just opened up a store right off of Halsted,
That's across the street
right?
from my office. Yeah, that location.
Ah,
Yep.
okay. So my graduate course helped them with the launch for that store.
Okay.
And so he's just been great to work with, but it started with networking
Mhm.
with the student and just connecting outside of class.
That's awesome.
Hmm.
That
Yes.
really is.
I think I've had to fail one student
Mhm.
in 13 years,
Okay.
and I just talked to students the first day of class about this.
Mhm.
Listen, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
It really is not worth it. And I would have had two students. I just allowed her to drop the class.
Okay.
So I allowed her to make the decision
Okay.
on how we were going to handle that. But don't be tempted to cut corners by getting a copy of someone's paper, because most of us use a database. And
Mm.
so it's in the database. If they put it through Blackboard, instructors use safe assign. So it's just not worth it.
Yeah.
So
And
just
they're
go ahead.
risking, well, then there's also the violation for academic integrity as well.
Right,
So
that exactly
yeah,
right.
that's
Which
the
is
largest.
grounds for expulsion. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Uh,
it's not worth it.
It
It
absolutely,
really isn't worth it.
yeah. Okay.
The other thing is, this is so helpful for students who, from a career perspective. So I try to encourage students to compile a portfolio.
Okay.
So all of the work that students are doing from their freshman year, sophomore, junior, senior year, keep that in a portfolio. So it's one thing to talk about what you've done, especially if you don't have a lot of work experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
So rely on the stuff that you're doing in school
Okay.
to help you. And so I try to tell students to leverage the work that they're doing in the classroom, keep that work, put it in a portfolio, and show the interviewer what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one thing to talk about it, but actually show them.
Yeah.
And so it's a nice show and tell to have that. And then the last thing is to commit.
Mm.
Commit. And what I mean by committing is, I've had students, Aginah, who will make it through like right up until drop ad,
Mm-hmm.
which is very close to the midterm,
Mm-hmm.
and they drop. And this goes back to communication as well. If they would have just come to me and talked to me about the struggles, the issues, the questions, should I drop? And I do have students who will do that. They will ask me, do I need to get a B in this course? Should I stay in or should I drop?
Mm.
And we work out the math, and I will tell them, this is where you are, and this is probably the best that you can do in the class, and leave it up to them to make that decision. But
Mm-hmm.
some students don't, they just drop. And I'm like, oh God, you were so
So
close, or you
close.
could have changed things around.
Yeah.
So just, I would just tell students to commit to the
But
learning process and the learning experience.
yeah, but you're right. It does go back to that very basic step, which is to communicate.
Yes,
Communicate
yes.
early in a time.
Communicate early. Yes, communicate early. And we, I would say this, and this is the last thing I will say, is that students have a success team in place, a small cohort, and
Mm.
they may not even realize this, but it consists of the student, the professor, the advisor, the department head, as well as the dean.
Mhm.
So every semester, I am working with one of the deans, the advisors, my department head, in ensuring that a student that's struggling, ensuring that that they are able to get back on track to graduation.
Mhm.
Because graduation is the goal, right? It's
Right.
the ultimate goal. And so we care about our students. We are their, like I said, their biggest advocate. And so we're working together and collaborating and communicating when there's an issue and when there's a problem.
Mm.
And so, and you know, this goes back to committing and communicating as well. If they're committed to the goal,
Mhm.
and if they communicate, the cohort can come together to help.
Yeah.
So, and that's what we're here for. So
And I think if students, I think by hearing this straight from your mouth, because students or prospective students, don't often have an opportunity to kind of hear firsthand from a professor what the expectations are, or what the do's and don'ts are as far as being successful. um, and oftentimes students won't take advantage of the resources that are available to them, because you mentioned it earlier, sometimes they think that they are the only ones who are struggling, when in
Yes.
actuality there's going to be another student who's potentially struggling,
Yes.
or who has questions. So it's very important. That's where your tuition dollars are going towards that success,
Yes.
team, that cohort of folks who want to see you graduate. And I mean, I think it's safe to say we want our graduation rates to be high. So we have a vested interest, not only because of
Absolutely.
that, but because, we're in this to help students, um, at the end of the day.
Absolutely. 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 And I don't know if I touched on this before, but about 30, depending on which research study you read,
Mhm.
30 to 50% of the student population in the US consists of first generation students,
Mhm.
and a greater percentage is considered first sibling,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
So we know that this population is twice um, is unlikely to graduate. That rate is about twice the rate of the the other population, right? And
Mhm.
so helping these students to graduate is really really important, and especially at UIC because we have a large number of first generation
Yeah.
students that attend our college, right? Um, so this is especially helpful for that group.
Well, I'm glad we had an opportunity to talk about this. And w- as parents, and as higher ed,
Hmm.
folks, I think we also have the unique, position of seeing this from both sides, because we have
Yes.
children. Well, you currently have children who are in college. I'm on my way.
You're
But
on your way.
I'm on my way. But since you are, on the other side, you know, so I'm sure you can understand, some of the frustrations, or even some of the fears or concerns that your children probably had when they, were stepping foot on a college campus and trying to figure out how do they navigate this space.
Yes.
So
Hmm.
I'm sure there are plenty of parents who are tuning in who, find these tips to be very, very helpful. And I would just encourage, those parents to share this with your students so that they can hear firsthand. Because we all know that sometimes our children don't listen to what we have to say, and they have to hear
Yes.
it from someone else.
Absolutely.
But I would love for you to, come back. You have an open invitation to
Oh,
come
thank
back
you.
on to Light It Up.
Thank
There,
you.
there are plenty of things that we could talk about too. I'm probably gonna have to seek your counsel pretty soon as well anyway, but I'm sure
Okay.
there are plenty of other topics that we can definitely talk about as well, because I think you have a wealth of experience and knowledge that you can share with the audience. I mean, even from outside of the higher ed realm, just your background in marketing, definitely can be beneficial, to those who are tuning into the podcast.
I would love to come back. So thank you for the invitation.
Awesome. So, thank you, once again for joining me, and thank you to the listening and viewing audience. If you're viewing this on YouTube or Facebook, thanks for tuning in. Make sure that you subscribe to the Light It Up podcast channel, which is on YouTube and on Facebook. You can also follow Light It Up on Instagram using the handle at Light It Up Podcast. That's LITE podcast. And then you can also listen to Light It Up on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify. So leave a comment or review, or feel free to send an email at info@aginahmuhammad.com. So as I leave you this week, want to just tell you to continue to light it up and shine bright like a diamond. Thanks for joining me this week on Light It Up. Make sure you visit my website at www.lightituppodcast.com or www.aginahmuhammad.com. You can also find me on social media using the handle at Light It Up Podcast. If you like what you've heard, please be sure to hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, I'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or you can simply tell a friend about the show. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for a new episode. Until next time, light it up and shine bright like a diamond.